It developed that when the robot spoke of days, it meant a 24-hour cycle of light and dark, with temperatures to suit. Under other circumstances, the place would have been comfortable. The pantry was stocked with Earthside food that didn't help Murdoch's confidence any, since it was further evidence of the aliens' contacts with men. He cooked eggs and bacon, helped Waverill eat, then washed up the dishes. He felt uneasy without his clothes, the more because the weapons in them, through years of habit, were almost part of himself. He thought, "I'm getting too jumpy too soon. My nerves have to last a long time yet." While he was putting the dishes to drain, the robot walked into the room and watched him for a moment. Then it said to Waverill,
"Keep your hand on my shoulder and walk behind me."
It reached for Waverill's right hand and placed it on its own right shoulder, revealing in the process that its arm was double-jointed. Then it simply walked through the wall. The blind man, without flinching and perhaps without being aware, passed through the seemingly firm substance. When they were gone, Murdoch went quickly to the wall and passed his hands over it. Solid. The voice came from the ceiling.
"You cannot penetrate the walls except when told to. Any place you can reach in this half of the grounds is open to you. The half where your ship is will remain cut off. You may amuse yourself as you wish, so long as you do not willfully damage anything. We have gone to great effort to make this place comfortable for Terrans. Do not impair it for those who may come later."
Murdoch smiled inwardly. He'd known the walls would be solid. He'd only wanted to check the aliens' watchfulness. Now he knew that there was more to it than just the robot, and that the voice was standard wherever it came from. Not that the information helped any. He walked back to the middle of the building and went through the door across the lobby. In that half of the building were a library, a gymnasium, and what was evidently a solar system museum. There was nothing new to him in the museum. Though there were useful tables and data in the library, he was too tense to study. The gymnasium he'd use later. He went outside, walking gingerly on the gravel. The rear of the building was a featureless semicircle, the lawns and hedges unvaried. He took deep breaths of the air perfumed by flowers. He jumped at a sudden buzz near his elbow. A bee circled up from a blossom and headed for the top of the building to disappear over the edge. Murdoch considered jumping for a hold and hauling himself up to the top of the building to see if there were hives there, but decided not to risk the aliens' displeasure. He realized now that he'd been hearing the bees all the time without recognizing it, and was annoyed at himself for not being more alert. He paid more attention now, and saw that there were other insects too, ants and a variety of beetles. There were no birds, mammals or reptiles that he could see. He parted the hedge and leaned close to the clear wall, shading the surface with his hands to see into the ice. There were a few rocks in sight. He found one neatly sliced in two by the force field, or whatever it was, showing a trail of striations in the ice above it, where it had slowly settled. On Ganymede, the rate of sink of a cool rock would be very slow in the ice. Far back in the dimness, he could see a few vague objects that might have been large rocks or ships. There were some other things with vaguely suggestive shapes, like long eroded artifacts. Nothing that couldn't have been the normal fall-in from space. He went to the front of the building again and stood for a while, looking at the graveled other half of the place. He couldn't see any insects there, and not a blade of grass. He approached the barrier and leaned against it to see how it felt. It was rigid, but didn't feel glass-hard. Rather, it had a very slight surface softness, so he could press a fingernail in a fraction of a millimeter. He remembered that on Earth bees would blunder into a glass pane and looked around to see if they hit the barrier. They didn't. An inch or so from it, they turned in the air and avoided it. Neither could he see any insects crawling on the invisible surface. He pressed his face closer and noticed again the odd reluctance he'd felt when crossing on the way in. At ground level, a dark line not more than a quarter of an inch thick marked where the barrier split the soil. Gravel heaped up against it on both sides. He looked again toward the ship. If things went according to plan, the ship's proximity alarm would go off sometime within the next 2 days. He didn't think the aliens would let him go to the ship, but he expected the diversion to help him check out something he'd heard about the barrier. He flexed his thumbs, feeling the small lumps implanted in the web of flesh between thumb and finger on each hand. He'd practiced getting the tiny instruments in and out until he could do it without thinking. But now the whole project seemed ridiculously optimistic. He felt annoyed at himself again. It's the aliens, he thought, that are getting my nerves. I've pulled plenty of jobs as intricate as this without fretting this way. He began another circuit around the building and was at the rear when the voice said, almost at his shoulder,
Murdoch, Waverill wants you.
His employer lay on his cot, looking drowsy. He scowled at Murdoch's footsteps.
Where you been? I want a drink.
Murdoch involuntarily glanced around.
Will they let you have it, sir?
The voice came from the ceiling this time.
1 ounce of 100-proof liquor every 4 hours.
Is there any here?
Tell us where to find it, and we will get it from your ship.
Murdoch told them where the ship's supply of beverages was stowed and headed for the front of the building. The robot was already in the lobby. It allowed him to follow outside, but said,
Stand back from the barrier.
Murdoch leaned against the building, trying not to show his eagerness. This was an unexpected break. He watched the ground level as the robot passed through the barrier. The dark line in the ground didn't change. The gravel stayed in place on both sides. Neither did the plants to the sides move. Evidently, the barrier only opened at one spot to let things through. The robot had no trouble with the hatches and came out quickly with a bottle in one hand. Murdoch worried again whether it had discovered that the ship's alarm was set. If so, it didn't say anything as it drew near. It handed Murdoch the bottle and disappeared into the building. After a few moments, Murdoch followed. He found Waverill asleep, but at his footsteps, the older man stirred.
Murdoch, where's that drink?
Right away, sir.
Murdoch got ice from the alien's pantry, put it in a glass with a little water, and poured in about a jigger of rye. He handed it to Waverill, then poured himself a straight shot. Rye wasn't his favorite, but it might ease his nerves a little.
S better.
Murdoch couldn't see any marks on him.
Did they stick any needles into you, sir?
I'm not paying you to be nosy.
Of course not, sir. I only wanted to know so I wouldn't touch you in a sore spot.
There are no sore spots. I want to sleep a couple of hours, so go away. Then I'll want a steak and a baked potato.
Surely, sir.
Murdoch went outside again and toured the grounds without seeing anything new. He went to the barrier and stared at the ship for a while. Then, to work off tension, he went into the gymnasium and took a workout. He had a shower, looked in on Waverill and found him still asleep, then went back to the library. The books and tapes were all Terran, with no clues about the aliens. The museum was no more helpful. It was a relief when he heard Waverill calling. There were steaks in the larder and potatoes. Waverill grumbled at the wait while Murdoch cooked. The older man still acted a little drowsy, but had a good appetite. After eating, he wanted to rest again. Murdoch wandered some more, then forced himself to sit down in the library and pretend to study. He went over his plans again and again. They were tenuous enough. He had to get a drop of Waverill's blood sometime within the next day or two and get it past the barrier. Then he had to get it into the ship and, once away from Ganymede, inoculate himself. The problem of Waverill didn't worry him. The drowsiness would have to be coped with, but based on the timetable Waverill's symptoms would give him, he should be able to set up a flight plan which would allow him to nap. The time dragged agonizingly. He had 2 more drinks during the afternoon, took another workout and a couple of turns around the building, and finally saw the sun lamps dimming. After that, there was a time of lying on his bunk, trying to force himself to relax. Finally, he did sleep.